Today my guest is Paul Litwin. Paul, how are you?
All right. How are you, David?
I'm doing great. How are you enjoying the conference?
Conference is fantastic. Like most of the events we put on, no major problems. Everything going smoothly. I've done all three of my talks. We ran open spaces last night. That went real smoothly, and everyone seems to be pretty happy.
I like the open spaces. So you're speaking of somebody that's actually been involved in putting the conference on. Are you able to enjoy the conference at all?
I am. Usually that's after I've done my talks.
Okay, then you actually
but
attend the session.
as you saw, I go out in the evenings, at least for a few hours. I try not to overindulge when I know I have responsibilities. But that's why I'm here. So I try not to misuse that, and I take it seriously. But a big part of why I enjoy these events is the networking, both with people I know and the people that I just met at that show.
Great.
Or who want to pick my brain or whatever. And so that's a big part of it. And so there's some social component to it too.
Yeah, I saw a good session yesterday. It was on MVC scaffolding.
Oh, really?
And
who did that?
You did that one. That was your session.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I do a lot of MVC work myself, but I haven't really done a lot of the scaffolding, which just came out in MVC 3 a few months ago. Share with us, what is MVC scaffolding?
So, in MVC 3, after you install the tools update, there is some, actually, let's go back to MVC 1 or 2, I forget which. They had some really rudimentary crude scaffolding built into the add controller dialog and the add view dialog.
Yeah, that was right click.
Right. So you say add controller, it basically just gives you the skeleton of the CRUD actions or methods in there. And then when you right click on a method, it will give you the skeleton of the view. And I think they added in version 2 that you can have strongly typed views. I'm not sure if that was in.
I think it was in 1.
It was in 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strongly typed views, and then it would stub out the add method and the delete method.
But you had to write all that code yourself.
Then you wite the code out.
Okay. So, and then with the tools update, which was after Visual Studio 2010 SP1, I know it's hard to keep all this stuff straight.
Right.
There was a MVC 3 tools update.
Right.
And they beefed up the scaffolding, so now it will work with Entity Framework 4.1, and it will pretty much fully populate all of the actions for a controller that hooks up to an Entity Framework class. So that works nicely.
So these are the CRUD actions.
The CRUD actions, and it actually will create the views also.
Okay.
So this has nothing to do with MVC scaffolding yet. I mean, it's the idea of scaffolding, but it's not the NuGet package, which we're going to get to in a second. And it works pretty nice, but it only does so much. It's pretty much, it's it. You get one shot, you do it, and then you have to modify stuff yourself. And it does not include a repository class, for example.
Okay.
So Steve Sanderson, who is a Microsoft program manager now in the ASP.NET team, but used to be independent until about a year ago, created this NuGet package. I guess originally with Scott Hanselman. I don't know if Scott Hanselman actually wrote any of the code, or it was just some of his ideas.
Okay.
But he is noted as an author as well. But Steve Sanderson manages it, and he's got a bunch of blog entries that talk about it. I think he's got 7 entries on the MVC scaffolding, which is pretty much the documentation. As you know, most of the stuff coming out of companies these days, including Microsoft, just is not, they don't have the time. Stuff's coming out so quick.
Especially these out-of-band releases here.
Yep. And so a lot of stuff is documented on blogs and such, and or you find an example somewhere. Anyway, this thing is just like the built-in scaffolding on steroids. First of all, you can get essentially the equivalent just by saying, first of all, you install this NuGet package. The name of the NuGet package is MVC scaffolding without any spaces.
Okay.
It's kind of a real generic name, which is sort of the way Microsoft works, right?
Right.
All these generic names. Anyway, you install that, and then it adds a bunch of commands to the package manager console, PowerShell commands. So now I could type scaffold, the word controller, and then the name of my model type. So if I had a model type of products that I had already created. Oh, by the way, it works with Entity Framework Code First. So you create your Code First classes, very simple classes.
Okay.
Okay. All you have to do is
do you have to do code first, or can you do database first and then generate those classes?
Well, you can. I've worked out a way to use database first, but it really works code first with the DB context.
Okay.
So If you want to do it with DB database first, what you do is create your database, or you generally have your database already, right? And then you go ahead and use the wizard for the ADO.NET classes, right? That says generate the model from the database.
Right. You're talking about Entity Framework now.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And you go in there, you generate the model. Then you use MVC, and then what you have to do is you have to right-click on the model and say Add Code Generation Item, and make that DB context, because the native one is still object context, which is the old school Entity Framework.
All right, so there's a dependency on not only Entity Framework, but Entity Framework 4.1 at least.
Yes, it is. It requires, in fact, when you install it, if hasn't already installed.
It takes care of that?
Yep, NuGet will do that. But I have found, in most situations, you want to run the Entity Framework 4.1 install separately.
Really?
Because some things don't work correctly just from the NuGet package, I have found. Especially if you're sharing your code with coworkers. You want to have them install that. Anyway, once you do that, you can then scaffold off of the DB context. And
so the command you said you're scaffolding out a controller.
Right.
What exactly does that buy? That generates some code, right?
Okay, so when you do scaffold controller, the name of the type, it will do the same thing, essentially, slight changes in the code of what the controller gives you. But if you put dash repository, for example, it will create a full repository class as well, and have that as a layer between your controller classes and your Entity Framework,
wow,
which is really nice. And then it will create all the views, and the views are pretty sophisticated. They will look at the relationships that you have in your model, and they will create drop downs for you.
Wow.
And even on the roll-up, the index page, if it sees a relationship, it will show counts for how many, let's say you have orders, and then order details. It will show how many order details are right on the index page, in a scaffolded out index page for product, for order, I mean.
So is it generating both the controller and the view then?
It's creating the controller and all the views.
And also this repository view,
right,
that switch as well.
But it isn't limited to that. You can individually say, I want to create a new view, scaffold out a new view, and so you can say scaffold view, boom, and can even say the type of view. Do you want it to be an edit, or you just want it to be something that's, just a shell of something?
Okay.
But if you say use this template, then it will use the edit template or the create template or the index template, and you can have it bind just one view at a time. You can also scaffold out an individual method or action within a controller.
Oh, will that open up that controller and modify that?
Yes.
Action?
Yes.
That already exists?
Yes. And you can tell it you want it to pass a view model to the view, and it will basically new up a little view model, and then you have to put the properties and how you construct the view model. And if you want, it can scaffold out a unit test for that method as well.
Nice. I like that.
And it'll do the shell of the unit test. And so it will do controllers, it will do views, it will do actions, it will do unit tests. And you can also say, let's say in your app you don't need a controller for a particular class, but that controller participates in some other way. You can scaffold just the repository for that class. So if you want to use it in a drop-down on another page or something,
right,
you can have it without the controller and without the views. And you can always use, there's lots of options so that you can control how the thing, and which model type it takes, and so you don't have to have the controller name be the same name as the model. And
is there configuration options, or are they switches on the
They're all
command?
switches.
Okay.
There's no.
What if I don't like the template itself? Is there a way that I can customize
Yes, that's the other thing. So one of the scaffolder that you can do, you say scaffold custom template, and what it does, and then you have to figure out what template it is. And by the way, if you just go to my deeptraining.com/Litwin, all the samples for the examples I did, and in there I include how do you scaffold out all these different things. But one of them is how do you create a custom template. And what it does is it puts the existing template in a folder, and then you can go and modify the T4
Okay. Oh, the
template.
T4 template. This is the secret templating engine that Microsoft has had for years and never told us about.
You can modify the template yourself, and then all scaffolding after that will use your modified template. So one of the things I do is I don't really like those kind of dumb comments they put in for each action in the controller, because I don't find they're useful, and they waste a lot of space. So I just removed those in my version, and it did that. You can also create custom scaffolders. That's a little more work. I haven't actually done that yet, but it actually does allow you. So let's say You wanted to set it up so it worked with Oracle instead of SQL Server. You could, in theory, create that, add your own scaffolder.
Oh, sure. Or maybe a different ORM.
Right, or maybe your view is to use jQuery, a jQuery grid instead of on the index page. You could do that as well.
All right, and I want to get started with this. Is this something I just go to my NuGet and download, or is that?
Yep, just go install package MVC scaffolding. And now go to Steve Sanderson's blog, got a lot of nice entries on that. There's an entry on my blog, if you search for Paul Litwin blog, on how to do it with database first. Okay. There's a few steps where you have to swap out the context in the repositories or the controllers it builds. And it's really easy to do. It's like 7 steps, and I've successfully done that in several apps with the database first.
All right. Paul, thank you very much.
You're welcome, David.